Jake Morrison wiped the grease from his hands and stared at the broken atmospheric regulator. The metal housing was cracked, and warning lights blinked angry red across the control panel. His stomach twisted into a knot. He had only been trying to fix a small leak, but somehow he had made everything worse. This was the third major mistake this month, and the colony administrator would not be happy. New Haven Colony sat on the edge of human space, a small mining settlement on a planet covered in purple forests and strange alien creatures. 200 humans called this place home, and most of them wished Jake lived somewhere else. At 19 years old, he was supposed to be useful, supposed to contribute like everyone else his age. But Jake could not use the standard augmentations that made other colonists stronger and faster. His genetics rejected the implants, leaving him weak and clumsy compared to his peers. The other young people his age worked in the mines, operated heavy machinery, or trained as security officers. Jake fixed toilets and cleaned air filters. Even those simple jobs, he often messed up. "Morrison!" The voice cut through the maintenance bay like a knife. Helen Drake, the colony administrator, stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. Her face was red with anger. "What did you do now?" Jake opened his mouth to explain, but Helen raised her hand to stop him. "The oxygen levels dropped in 3 habitation sectors because of your incompetence. Do you understand what could have happened? People could have died, Jake. Died because you cannot do a simple repair job." Other colonists gathered at the doorway, watching. Jake saw Lisa Grant among them, her face showing sympathy. She was one of the few people who still treated him kindly. Most of the others looked at him with contempt or pity, which somehow felt worse. "I'm sorry," Jake said quietly. "I thought I could fix it." "You always think you can fix things," Helen said coldly, "but you cannot. The Galactic Council delegation arrives tomorrow. Important aliens from a dozen species will visit our colony to discuss trade agreements. I need you to stay out of sight. Clean the lower storage areas and do not touch anything important. Can you manage that?" Jake nodded, his face burning with shame. The crowd dispersed, most people shaking their heads or whispering to each other. Lisa walked over and put her hand on his shoulder. "It'll be okay," she said softly. "You're not as bad as they think." "I'm exactly as bad as they think," Jake replied. "Maybe worse." That night, Jake could not sleep. He lay in his small quarters and listened to the sounds of the colony preparing for the delegation's arrival. Through his window, he could see the purple forest swaying in the wind. Sometimes he wished he could just walk into those trees and disappear. Out there, nobody would care if he was clumsy or weak. Out there, different rules applied. The next day, the delegation arrived in a sleek ship that made New Haven's vessels look like scrap metal. Jake watched from the lower levels as aliens of various species stepped out. There were tall, graceful Eldari with their flowing robes. There were small, quick Skrit who moved in coordinated groups. And there was something else, something that made the entire crowd step back. A Krauth emerged from the ship. The creature stood nearly 8 feet tall, with reptilian features and 4 eyes that scanned the area with predatory intelligence. Its body was covered in dark scales, and it moved with a fluid grace that seemed impossible for something so large. Jake had heard of the Krauth before. They were legendary hunters, feared across the galaxy for their skill and strength. This one wore simple leather armor, decorated with bones and teeth from creatures Jake could not identify. "That is Vextor," someone whispered nearby. "The Vextor. He has lived for over 300 years and has hunted on 1,000 worlds." Jake felt something strange as he watched the Krauth. It was not fear exactly, though he probably should have been afraid. It was more like recognition, as if some deep part of him understood what he was seeing. The formal dinner that evening was held in the colony's main hall. Jake was assigned to serve drinks, a job that kept him moving and mostly invisible. He carried a tray of beverages between the tables where colonists and aliens sat, making polite conversation. His hands shook slightly. He concentrated on not spilling anything. But concentration was not enough. As Jake approached the table where Vexthor sat, his foot caught on an uneven floor panel. The tray tilted, and blue liquid splashed across the Krauth's shoulder and chest. The entire hall went silent. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned to Jake. Jake froze, still holding the empty tray. He waited for the Krauth to roar, to strike him, to do whatever terrible thing would happen next. The stories said Krauth were honor-bound warriors who answered insults with violence. Instead, Vexthor laughed. The sound was deep and rumbling, like distant thunder. The Krauth stood up, liquid dripping from his armor, and looked down at Jake with all four eyes. Those eyes were not angry. They were curious. "The clumsy one," Vexthor said in perfect human language, his voice rough but clear. "You fear me." "Yes," Jake admitted. There was no point in lying. "Good," Vexthor said. "Fear is the beginning of wisdom." He turned to Helen Drake, who sat at the head table looking horrified. "I wish to speak with this human, privately." Helen stood up quickly. "That won't be necessary. He's just a maintenance worker, not important at all. I apologize for his clumsiness, and—" "I did not ask for apologies," Vexthor interrupted. "I asked to speak with him. Unless you wish to insult me by refusing." Helen's mouth opened and closed. Refusing a direct request from a Galactic Council representative, especially one as respected as Vexthor, could damage the colony's standing. "Of course not. Jake, go with our honored guest." Vexthor placed a large hand on Jake's shoulder and guided him toward the exit. Jake's mind raced with questions and fears. What did this legendary hunter want with him? Why had he laughed instead of getting angry? What would happen once they were alone? They walked through the colony corridors in silence. Vexthor's clawed feet clicked against the metal floor. Other colonists pressed themselves against the walls to let them pass, staring with wide eyes. Jake felt like he was being led to his execution. When they reached the colony's outer airlock, Vexthor stopped. "We will go outside," he said, "into your world's wilderness. There we will talk about what you truly are." "What I am?" Jake asked. "I'm nobody. Just a failed colonist who can't do anything right." Vexthor's four eyes focused on Jake with an intensity that made him want to look away. "That is what they see," the Krauth said. "But I see something different. Something your people have forgotten how to recognize. Come, let me show you what I mean." The airlock opened, and the night air of the alien world rushed in, carrying scents of the purple forest and unknown dangers. Jake took a deep breath and followed the legendary hunter into the darkness, not knowing that his entire life was about to change. The forest beyond New Haven's protective walls was nothing like the safe, controlled corridors of the colony. Purple trees stretched toward the alien sky, their leaves rustling with sounds that might have been wind, or might have been something else. Strange calls echoed through the darkness, and Jake's heart pounded in his chest as he followed Vexthor deeper into the wilderness. The Krauth moved through the forest like he belonged there. His large body slipped between trees without making a sound, while Jake stumbled over roots and kicked loose stones. After several minutes, Jake expected Vexthor to comment on his clumsiness, but the hunter said nothing. He just kept walking, his four eyes scanning the surroundings. Finally, they reached a small clearing where moonlight filtered through the canopy. Vexthor sat down on a fallen log and gestured for Jake to sit across from him. Jake obeyed, still confused and frightened about what was happening. "Tell me, young human," Vexthor began, "why do your people scorn you?" Jake looked down at his hands. "Because I'm useless. I can't use the augmentations that make everyone else better. I'm weak and clumsy. I break things instead of fixing them." And this makes you worthless? Vextor asked. In a colony like New Haven, yes. Everyone needs to contribute. Everyone needs to be strong and capable. I'm neither. Vextor made a sound that might have been amusement. Your people measure worth in strange ways. Tell me something else. When you walked through this forest, what did you notice? Jake blinked at the question. I noticed I kept tripping over things. Before that, what did you see? What did you hear? What did you smell? He had been too scared to pay attention to details, but now that Vextor asked, he realized he had noticed things. The moss on the north side of the trees is thicker. There's a stream somewhere to the east. I can hear it. Something died recently, maybe 50 meters behind us. The scent is faint, but it's there. Vextor's 4 eyes gleamed with something that looked like satisfaction. Good. What else? The calls we heard came from above, probably nest-building birds, but there was another sound, lower, from something that moves on the ground. Something big. Very good, Vextor said. Now tell me, did any of your enhanced colonists notice these things when they venture into this forest? Jake thought about the few times he had seen security teams go on patrols. They relied on their scanners and sensors, barely looking at their surroundings with their own eyes. No, he admitted. They use technology to tell them what's around them. Exactly, Vextor said. They have made themselves strong with machines, but they have made themselves blind in the process. You, young Jake, see the world as it truly is. Your people call this weakness, but I call it a gift. Before Jake could respond, Vextor held up one clawed hand for silence. Something comes, the Krauth whispered. Something hungry. Jake heard it then, a rustling in the trees above them. His instincts screamed at him to run, but he forced himself to stay still. Movement attracted predators. He did not know how he knew that, but he did. 3 shapes dropped from the canopy. They were razor wings, flying predators with leathery wings and beaks full of sharp teeth. Each one was the size of a large dog, and they circled the clearing with predatory intelligence. Jake had seen pictures of razor wings in the colony database. They were dangerous pack hunters that sometimes attacked lone colonists. Jake looked at Vextor, expecting the Krauth to do something, but the hunter simply watched. His 4 eyes moved between Jake and the razorwings, measuring, judging. The first razorwing dove at Jake. He threw himself sideways, rolling across the ground. The creature's beak snapped shut where his head had been a second before. Jake grabbed a fallen branch and swung it wildly. The branch connected with the razorwing's wing, and the creature screeched in pain. 2 more razorwings attacked together. Jake could not fight them both. Instead, he ran toward the fallen log where Vextor sat. He jumped over it, using the log as a barrier between himself and the predators. The razorwings flew around, trying to find an angle of attack. Jake's mind raced. He could not outfight these creatures. He was not strong enough or fast enough. He noticed sharp stones scattered around the clearing. He grabbed one and threw it at the nearest razorwing. His aim was poor, but the stone startled the creature, making it hesitate. One of the razorwings landed on the log, preparing to jump down at Jake. In that moment, Jake saw his chance. He grabbed another branch, this one with a pointed end, and thrust it upward just as the razorwing jumped. The makeshift spear caught the creature in its chest. It shrieked and thrashed, knocking the branch from Jake's hands. But the injury was serious. The razorwing retreated, blood dripping from its wound. The other 2 razorwings became more cautious. They circled, but did not attack immediately. Jake backed toward a large tree, putting solid wood at his back so they could not surround him. His breathing was heavy, and his hands shook from adrenaline, clearer than it had ever felt in the colony. He watched the razorwings' movements, learning their patterns. When one dove at him, He ducked and rolled. When the other tried to flank him, he moved to keep the tree between them. He threw more stones, not trying to hurt them, but to keep them off balance. Minutes passed. The fight became a game of patience and positioning. Finally, the Razorwings gave up. They were hunters, and hunters did not waste energy on prey that fought too hard. They took flight and disappeared into the canopy, their calls fading into the distance. Jake collapsed against the tree, his chest heaving. His clothes were torn, and he had cuts on his arms and face, but he was alive. He looked at Vexthor, who had watched the entire fight without moving. "Why didn't you help me?" Jake asked between gasps for air. "Because you did not need help," Vexthor replied. He stood and walked over to Jake. "You fought with your mind, not your body. You used the terrain, improvised weapons, and read your enemy's behavior. These are the skills of a true hunter." "I was just trying to survive," Jake said. "That is what hunting is," Vexthor explained. "Survival. Your people have forgotten this. They think hunting is about strength and technology. But real hunting is about understanding, adaptation, and respect for both prey and predator." The crowd reached into a pouch on his belt and pulled out a small knife. Before Jake could react, Vexthor cut his own palm, letting dark blood pool in his hand. Then he gestured for Jake to come closer. "Among my people there is a ritual," Vexthor said. "When we recognize someone as worthy, we may claim them as kin by choice. It is a bond deeper than blood relation. It means I will teach you, protect you, and expect greatness from you. Do you understand?" Jake nodded slowly, not entirely sure he did understand, but knowing this was important. Vexthor reached down and pressed his bloodied palm to Jake's forehead. The blood was warm and thick. The Krauth spoke words in his own language, harsh sounds that Jake could not understand, but felt in his bones. When he finished, Vexthor stepped back. "You are now kin to me," Vexthor said. "No longer are you just Jake Morrison, failed colonist. You are Jake Morrison, hunter in training, student of Vexthor of the Krauth. Your old life ends here. Your new life begins now." Jake touched his forehead where the blood was already drying. Something had changed. He could feel it. The forest no longer seemed quite so threatening. The darkness no longer felt like an enemy. For the first time in his life, Jake felt like he might belong somewhere. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," Vexthor said, "we return to your colony. I will inform them that I am taking you with me to my homeworld. There, you will learn the true ways of the hunt. You will become what your ancestors once were, before they forgot how to listen to the wild." "They won't like that," Jake said. "The colony needs workers." "The colony needs hunters more than it knows," Vexthor replied. "Dark times come to this region of space. Your people will need warriors who understand more than technology and guns. They will need those who can track, ambush, and survive. They will need you, Jake Morrison, though they do not yet realize it." They walked back through the forest together, and this time Jake moved more carefully, more quietly. He was beginning to understand what Vexthor saw in him, even if he did not fully believe it yet. The legendary hunter had chosen him, had claimed him as kin. Whatever happened next, Jake's life would never be the same. The announcement came the next morning. Vexthor stood before the colony's leadership council and declared his intention to take Jake Morrison to the Krauth homeworld for training. Helen Drake's face turned pale, then red with anger. "This is absurd," she said. "He's a colonist, not some apprentice hunter. We need every worker we have." "You need capable people," Vexthor replied calmly. "This human is capable. You simply measure capability in the wrong ways. Under Galactic Council law, I have the right to take willing students across species boundaries. Does the human object? All eyes turned to Jake. He stood near the back of the room, still wearing his maintenance jumpsuit. Part of him wanted to refuse, to stay in the familiar world of New Haven despite the scorn. But another part, the part that had fought the Razorwings and felt truly alive for the first time, knew what his answer had to be. I want to go, Jake said quietly. Jake, be reasonable. You're throwing away your future here for some fantasy about becoming a hunter. You'll be back in a month, begging for your old job. Maybe, Jake admitted, but I have to try. The council had no legal grounds to stop him. Within 3 days, Jake had packed his few belongings and prepared to leave. Most colonists ignored his departure, but a few came to say goodbye. Lisa Grant was among them. "You're really doing this?" she asked, her eyes watery. "I am," Jake said. "I know it seems crazy." "It doesn't seem crazy," Lisa replied. "It seems like the first real choice you've made for yourself. Just promise me you'll come back someday. Come back and show them all how wrong they were about you." Jake hugged her. "I promise." The journey to Kragnor, the Krauth homeworld, took 2 weeks aboard Vexthor's ship. The vessel was unlike human ships, with organic curves and minimal technology visible. Vexthor explained that the Krauth believed in using only necessary tools. Excess technology made warriors soft and dependent. When they finally arrived at Kragnor, Jake's breath caught in his throat. The planet was beautiful and terrifying. Massive forests covered most of the continents, and mountain ranges stretched toward purple skies. He could see cities, but they blended into the landscape rather than dominating it. This was a world where nature and civilization existed in balance. Vexthor's clan lived in a valley surrounded by steep cliffs. Their dwellings were made of stone and wood, built to last for centuries. Young Krauth ran through the streets, playing hunting games that looked like combat training to Jake's eyes. Adult Krauth stopped and stared as Vexthor led Jake through the clan grounds. A human was rare here. "They will test you," Vexthor warned. "My people respect strength and skill. You must earn their acceptance." That night, Vexthor brought Jake before the clan elders. 5 ancient Krauth sat around a fire, their scales marked with countless scars from centuries of hunts. They examined Jake with multiple eyes that missed nothing. "This is the human?" one elder asked in their language. Vexthor had given Jake a translation device, a small piece of technology the Krauth allowed for communication between species. "This is Jake Morrison," Vexthor confirmed. "I have claimed him as kin by choice. He has the instincts of a natural hunter." "He looks weak," another elder observed. "Small and fragile, even for a human." "Strength comes in many forms," Vexthor replied. "I will prove his worth through training." The elders granted permission for Jake to stay, but their skepticism was clear. The real challenge began the next morning, when Jake joined a group of young Krauth in their daily training. There were 6 of them, all adolescents by Krauth standards, which meant they were still twice Jake's size and strength. The instructor was a scarred warrior named Krazek. He looked at Jake with barely concealed contempt. "We will start with basic exercises," he announced. "Running, climbing, and combat drills. Keep up or go home, human." The run nearly killed Jake. The young Krauth moved with effortless speed across rocky terrain that tore at Jake's feet, even through his boots. He fell behind within minutes, his lungs burning and legs screaming in pain. But he kept moving. When the others finished and he was still struggling up the final hill, they watched with amusement. Jake ignored them and kept running until he crossed the finish line, even though he was last. Climbing was worse. The Krauth scaled cliff faces using their natural claws and powerful limbs. Jake had to use ropes and find handholds the hard way. He slipped multiple times, caught only by his safety harness. The young Kralf laughed openly at his struggles. Still, he made it to the top. Combat drills were a disaster. The Kralf fought with controlled ferocity, their strikes powerful enough to dent stone. When Jake sparred with the smallest trainee, he was knocked down within seconds. Then again. Then again. By the end of the session, he was bruised and bleeding. That night, Jake lay in his quarters, wondering if Helen Drake had been right. Maybe he was not cut out for this. Maybe he should give up and go home. Vexthor found him there. "You wish to quit?" the old hunter said. It was not a question. "I can't keep up with them," Jake admitted. "I'm not strong enough, not fast enough. I don't belong here." "You are correct," Vexthor said. Jake's heart sank until the Kralf continued. "You do not belong among those who rely on strength. But you do belong among those who rely on cunning. Come with me." Vexthor led Jake into the forest at night. They walked for an hour until they reached a clearing where a large beast grazed. It looked like a six-legged elk, with horns that glowed faintly in the darkness. "That is a moonhorn," Vexthor explained. "Peaceful creatures, but alert and fast. The young Kralf you train with could chase it down with their speed and strength. But you cannot, so you must hunt it differently. Show me how you would approach." Jake studied the moonhorn carefully. The wind blew from the creature toward them, which was good. It had not detected their scent. The clearing was open, offering no cover for a direct approach. But the forest edge curved around, and if Jake circled wide, he could approach from downwind, using the trees for concealment. "I would go around," Jake said, pointing. "Stay in the shadows, move when it's grazing, and not looking up." "Well, I don't know what happens then, since I don't have a weapon." "The approach is what matters," Vexthor said. "Watch." The old hunter demonstrated, moving through the forest with impossible silence. He circled the clearing, becoming one with the shadows, timing his movements to the moonhorn's behavior. In minutes, he was close enough to touch the creature. Then, he simply walked back. "That is hunting," Vexthor said. "Not fighting, not overpowering. Understanding your prey, using the environment, becoming invisible. This is where you will excel, Jake Morrison. Your weakness in strength is your strength in stealth. Your small size makes you harder to see. Your careful nature makes you patient. These are Hunter's gifts." Over the following months, Vexthor trained Jake separately from the other students. While they practiced combat and strength, Jake learned tracking and stalking. He studied animal behavior and plant identification. He learned to read weather patterns and find water sources. He practiced moving through forests without making sound, climbing without being seen, and waiting motionless for hours. Slowly, Jake improved. His body adapted to the constant physical demands, becoming lean and tough. His senses sharpened from constant use. His mind learned to think like a predator, always planning, always observing. The young Kralf still mocked him during group training, but Jake noticed their mockery held less conviction. A few began asking him questions about tracking techniques. 6 months into his training, Krozek assigned a test. Each student had to hunt and return with a forest prowler, a cat-like predator known for its stealth and cunning. The young Kralf went out confidently, relying on their strength to overpower the creatures. Jake went out differently. He spent 2 days studying prowler tracks and behavior patterns. He learned where they denned, what they hunted, and when they were most active. On the 3rd day, he set a trap using knowledge Vexthor had taught him about animal psychology. He baited it with meat and waited. When Jake returned with his prowler, the other students had already brought theirs in. But Jake's prowler was different. The others had killed their prey after long, violent struggles. Jake's prowler was alive, sedated with herbs Vexthor had shown him, trapped cleanly without unnecessary suffering. Krozek examined the prowler and then looked at Jake with new respect. "This shows true skill," the instructor admitted. "You hunted with your mind. Well done, human." That evening, Vextor presented Jake with his first real hunting weapon, a blade forged in the traditional Krauth style. It was simple, elegant, and perfectly balanced for Jake's size. "You have learned the basics," Vextor said. "But the true test comes soon. In 1 month, you will face the trial of first blood." 2 years passed on Kragnor. 2 years of training, hunting, and transformation. Jake Morrison was no longer the clumsy colonist who broke atmospheric regulators. His body was lean and muscular, hardened by constant physical challenges. His face bore scars from close encounters with dangerous prey. His eyes had changed the most. They were sharper now, always watching, always measuring distances and reading body language. The trial of first blood had been the turning point. Vextor had sent Jake into the deep wilderness alone to hunt a thornback ravager, a massive predator with armored hide and razor-sharp claws. The hunt lasted 3 days. Jake tracked the beast through mountains and forests, learning its habits, finding its weaknesses. When he finally faced it, he used every skill Vextor had taught him. He did not try to overpower the ravager. Instead, he led it into a narrow canyon where its size became a disadvantage, then struck at the weak points in its armor with precise attacks. When Jake returned with the ravager's skull, the Krauth clan celebrated him as a true hunter. Now, as Jake prepared to return to New Haven, he packed his belongings with mixed feelings. Kragnor had become home in a way the colony never had. Here, he was respected. Here, he belonged. But Vextor had insisted it was time. "You learned these skills for a reason," the old hunter said. "Your people will need them soon. I have received reports of increased Score Dominion activity near human colonies. They are testing defenses, looking for weaknesses. New Haven is isolated and vulnerable." The Score were raiders and conquerors, a species that respected only strength and viewed smaller colonies as easy prey. Jake had learned about them during his time on Kragnor. They were dangerous, but Vextor believed the skills Jake had learned could make a difference. The journey back to New Haven took 2 weeks. Jake spent much of that time in meditation, a practice Vextor had taught him for maintaining focus and calm. When the colony finally appeared on the view screen, Jake felt his stomach tighten with anxiety. Would they even recognize him? Would they still see him as the failure who left? The Krauth ship landed at New Haven's primary docking bay. As Jake walked down the ramp, he saw a crowd gathered. At the front stood Helen Drake, looking older than Jake remembered. Next to her was Captain Ryan Brooks, the colony's military commander, a tall man with enhanced muscles and cybernetic implants that glowed faintly under his skin. Behind them, Jake spotted Lisa Grant. Her eyes went wide when she saw him, and a smile spread across her face. She pushed through the crowd and ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck. "You came back," she said. "You actually came back." "I promised," Jake replied, returning the hug. Helen stepped forward, her expression neutral. "Mr. Morrison, you've changed." Jake wore traditional Krauth hunter's garb, leather armor decorated with bones and teeth from his kills. The blade Vextor had given him hung at his side, along with other weapons and tools. He knew he looked different, probably strange to colonists accustomed to jumpsuits and standard equipment. "Administrator Drake," Jake said politely, "it's good to be home." "Is it?" Helen asked. "Because from what I understand, you're quite comfortable with your alien friends now." Before Jake could respond, Captain Brooks laughed. "Look at this. Morrison comes back playing dress-up as a savage. Tell me, Jake, did living in the woods teach you anything useful, or did you just waste 2 years?" Jake felt anger rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. Vextor had taught him that hunters did not react to provocations. They waited. They observed. They chose their moments carefully. I learned many things, Captain. I hope I won't need to demonstrate them. We don't need your primitive skills here, Brooks said. New Haven has trained soldiers with real weapons and armor. We have sensors and automated defenses. We're protected by modern technology, not Stone Age hunting tricks. Vexthor, who had been standing quietly near the ship, finally spoke. Perhaps, but technology has weaknesses. The Score know this. They are coming, Captain Brooks. When they arrive, you may wish you had more hunters among your soldiers. Brooks turned to face the crowd. With respect, honored guest, we're prepared for any threat. The Score haven't shown interest in this sector, and even if they did, our defenses would handle them. Your confidence is admirable, Vexthor said. Also foolish, but humans must learn their own lessons. That night, Jake settled back into his quarters. Lisa visited him, bringing food and asking hundreds of questions about Kragnor and his training. He told her stories about the hunts, the challenges, and the friends he had made among the Krauth. She listened with fascination. They still don't respect you here, Lisa said sadly. Brooks and Helen haven't changed their minds about you. I know, Jake replied, but I didn't come back for their approval. I came back because Vexthor believes New Haven needs protection. If he's right about the Score, people will need someone who can fight differently. Do you really think the Score will attack? Vexthor is rarely wrong about these things. 5 days later, Vexthor was proven correct. The Score came at night. Their ships appeared on sensors, but instead of attacking the main colony, they deployed small infiltration teams in the surrounding wilderness. The automated defenses, designed to stop ship-based attacks, never detected them. Jake was awake when the first explosions hit. He ran outside and saw fires burning in the power station sector. Alarms blared across the colony. Colonists ran in confusion, while security forces scrambled to respond. Captain Brooks appeared on the communication system, ordering all civilians to shelters and deploying his soldiers to defensive positions. But Jake knew this tactic. The Score were not attacking the fortified areas. They were hitting infrastructure from the wilderness, using the forest for cover, just as Jake had been trained to do. The colony's soldiers, equipped for conventional warfare, were hunting enemies they could not find. Jake found Vexthor near the Krauth ship. The old hunter was armed and ready. They moved through the forest like ghosts, Vexthor said. Your soldiers cannot track them, but you can, my student. Will you hunt? Yes, Jake said without hesitation. Together they moved into the forest. Jake's training immediately took over. He read the signs the Score left behind: broken branches, disturbed soil, the faint scent of their equipment. While colony sensors swept uselessly above, Jake tracked the infiltration teams on the ground. He found the first Score team setting explosives near a water processing facility. There were 3 of them, heavily armed and armored. Jake circled around them silently, using shadows and terrain for cover. Vexthor watched from a distance, allowing Jake to lead. Jake did not announce himself. He did not demand surrender. He simply acted. Moving from shadow to shadow, he struck the first Score from behind with his blade, finding the weak point where the raiders' armor plates joined. The Score fell silently. The second turned, weapon rising, but Jake was already moving. He threw a weighted cord that tangled the Score's legs, then closed in for a quick, efficient kill. The third Score actually saw Jake coming and opened fire. But Jake had anticipated this. He rolled behind a tree, used the terrain to close the distance, and engaged in close combat where the Score's rifle was useless. The fight was brief and brutal. Jake's training had made him lethal in ways the Score did not expect. Throughout the night, Jake hunted 5 more Score teams. He moved through the forest like a ghost, appearing from nowhere, striking fast, and disappearing before reinforcements arrived. Some he killed, others he wounded, and left for colony security to capture. He did not fight like a soldier. He fought like a hunter, using every advantage the environment provided. By dawn, the Score infiltration was broken. Their teams were dead or captured, and the surviving raiders retreated to their ships. Colony defenses, now aware of the threat, drove the Score vessels away with heavy fire. New Haven was safe. Jake emerged from the forest as the sun rose. He was covered in dirt and blood, some his own, most belonging to the enemy. Colony security forces stared at him in shock. Captain Brooks approached, his expression complicated. You stopped them," Brooks said quietly. "My soldiers couldn't even find them, but you hunted them down in the dark." "I did what I was trained to do," Jake replied simply. Vexthor appeared beside Jake and addressed the gathered crowd. "This human is a hunter worthy of the Krauth. He protected your colony using skills your technology could not match. You scorned him once. I suggest you learn from your mistake." Helen Drake stepped forward. For the first time since Jake had known her, she looked uncertain. "Mr. Morrison, I owe you an apology. We all do." Jake was too tired to feel triumphant. He simply nodded. "The Score will come back. They always do when they find weak targets. Next time, we need to be ready." The morning after the Score attack, New Haven held an emergency council meeting. Jake sat at the main table for the first time in his life, still wearing his hunting gear. The other colonists looked at him differently now, not with scorn or pity, but with respect mixed with a little fear. He had killed enemy raiders in the darkness while their advanced soldiers stumbled through the forest blind. Captain Brooks stood before the assembly, his pride clearly wounded, but his professionalism intact. "The Score tested our defenses and found weaknesses we didn't know existed. They bypassed our sensors and automated systems. If not for Morrison and the honored Vexthor, we would have suffered catastrophic damage." He paused, then looked directly at Jake. "I was wrong about you. Your skills are valuable, perhaps more valuable than I want to admit." Helen Drake cleared her throat. "The question is what we do now. The Score know we're vulnerable in the wilderness areas. They'll come back with larger forces. Then we need to change how we fight," Jake said. All eyes turned to him. He felt nervous speaking before the full council, but Vexthor had taught him that hunters must also be leaders when the situation demanded it. "Our technology is good for defending the colony proper, but it's useless in the forest. We need people who could fight in the wilderness using more than sensors and guns." "You're suggesting we train wilderness fighters?" Brooks asked. "Yes, a unit that combines human technology with hunting techniques, people who can track, ambush, and survive without depending on electronics that can be jammed or avoided." One of the council members, an older woman named Kate Porter, spoke up. "That would take time we don't have. The Score could return in days or weeks." Vexthor, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. "I will remain on New Haven to assist with training. My student Jake can lead the instruction, but I will ensure the techniques are properly taught. If you provide willing students, we can prepare a basic force within 2 months." The council debated for another hour, but eventually agreed. They had no better options, and Jake's success against the Score was impossible to deny. Captain Brooks would select volunteers from his security forces, and Jake would train them in wilderness warfare. The volunteers assembled the next morning. Jake expected a handful of people at most, but 25 colonists showed up, including several who had once mocked him openly. Lisa Grant was among them, and her presence made Jake smile. She had never shown any combat aptitude before, but her determination was clear. "All right," Jake said, addressing the group. "I'm not a soldier, and I'm not going to teach you to be soldiers. I'm going to teach you to be hunters. This means forgetting a lot of what you think you know about fighting. Being a hunter isn't about overpowering your enemy. It's about understanding them, predicting them, and striking when they're most vulnerable." The first weeks were brutal. Jake pushed the volunteers hard, just as Vexthor had pushed him. They learned to move silently through the forest, to read tracks and signs, to identify edible and poisonous plants. They learned to set traps and ambushes. Most importantly, they learned patience and observation. Many struggled. Some quit after the first week, unable to adapt to the physical demands and different mindset. But those who remained grew stronger and more capable. Lisa surprised everyone, including herself. Her smaller size, which had seemed like a disadvantage, made her excellent at stealth work. She became one of Jake's best students. Vexthor worked with the students on understanding prey and predator psychology. He taught them that every creature, including intelligent enemies like the Score, had patterns and habits that could be exploited. He shared stories from his centuries of hunts, making lessons from each one. Captain Brooks observed the training sessions regularly. At first, he seemed skeptical, but gradually his attitude changed. One day he approached Jake during a break. "I've been thinking," Brooks said. "My soldiers are good at conventional combat, but they're too dependent on their equipment. If we combined your methods with our technology, we might create something more effective than either approach alone." "What do you have in mind?" Jake asked. "Joint training. Your hunters learn to use some modern weapons and communications gear. My soldiers learn your tracking and survival techniques. We become more versatile." Jake considered this. It went against pure Krauth philosophy, which emphasized minimal technology. But Jake was human, not Krauth, and humans had always been adaptable. "Let's try it, but the technology should support the hunter, not replace the skills." The combined training created something new, a hybrid fighting force that blended ancient hunting wisdom with modern equipment. The unit could operate in the wilderness for days without support, track enemies across difficult terrain, and engage in combat using both traditional and technological weapons. They learned to see the forest as an ally rather than an obstacle. 2 months after the first Score attack, the raiders returned. This time they came with 3 ships, and what intelligence suggested was a force of over 50 infiltrators. They clearly intended to overwhelm New Haven's defenses through sheer numbers. But New Haven was ready. As the Score deployed their teams in the wilderness, they found themselves entering a trap. Jake's unit, now calling themselves the Frontier Hunters, had mapped every approach to the colony. They had set sensors in key locations, not to replace their skills, but to provide early warning. They had prepared fallback positions and ambush points throughout the forest. Jake led his team from the front. They moved through the darkness with confidence, their training making them as comfortable in the wilderness as the Score. But the humans had advantages the raiders did not expect. They knew this forest intimately. Every tree, every stream, every hidden path had been studied and memorized. The battle lasted through the night. Jake's hunters engaged the Score teams one by one, using superior knowledge of terrain to dictate the terms of every fight. They attacked from unexpected angles, disappeared into shadows, and reappeared where the enemy least expected. Captain Brooks coordinated the effort from the colony, directing support when needed and ensuring no Score team could reach critical infrastructure. Lisa proved herself during the fight. She led a small team that ambushed a Score squad attempting to circle around to the colony's water supply. Using the techniques Jake had taught her, she positioned her people perfectly, waited for exactly the right moment, and struck with devastating efficiency. The Score team never knew what hit them. By morning, the Score force was shattered. Half their infiltrators were dead or captured. The rest retreated to their ships, which then fled when colony defense batteries opened fire. New Haven had won decisively, and this time the enemy had paid a heavy price. In the aftermath, word of the battle spread beyond New Haven. Other frontier colonies heard about the Score defeat and wanted to know how a small colony had accomplished it. Requests came in, asking for information about Jake's training methods. Some colonies asked if they could send students to learn from him. Jake discussed the requests with Vex Thor one evening as they sat overlooking the colony. The old Kralth had been preparing to leave, his duty to New Haven fulfilled, but he had delayed to see the results of their work. "You have created something important," Vex Thor said. "A way for your people to reconnect with ancient skills while maintaining their technological advantages. This is wisdom." "I couldn't have done it without you," Jake replied. "You saw something in me when no one else did. You gave me a chance when I had nothing." "I saw what was already there," Vex Thor corrected. "I simply helped you recognize it. Now you must decide what comes next. Will you stay here, or will you spread these teachings to other colonies?" Jake thought about it. New Haven was safe now, with a trained unit to protect it. But other colonies faced the same threats. The Score were not the only danger in the frontier regions of space. There were pirates, hostile wildlife, and countless other challenges that required more than technology to overcome. "I'll spread the teachings," Jake decided. "I'll call it the Frontier Hunters Program. Any colony that wants to learn can send people and we'll teach them. But I'll need a permanent base, instructors, and support." "The Kralth will help," Vex Thor promised. "This work honors the old ways. We will provide instructors and share our knowledge. You are building a legacy, Jake Morrison, something that will protect your people for generations." The next week, Jake established the Frontier Hunters headquarters on the edge of New Haven's territory. The colony donated land and resources, grateful for the protection the program had provided. Captain Brooks assigned several of his best soldiers to help with instruction. Lisa became Jake's second-in-command, handling administrative work and coordinating with other colonies. Students began arriving from across the frontier. They came from mining colonies, research stations, and trading posts, anywhere humans lived on the edge of explored space. Jake taught them all the same lessons Vex Thor had taught him. He taught them to see with hunters' eyes, to think like predators, to respect the natural world, even while defending against its dangers. On the evening before Vex Thor finally departed, Jake met the old Kralth one last time at the forest's edge. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. Vex Thor stood tall, his 4 eyes reflecting the fading light. "This is farewell," Vex Thor said. "My final hunt calls to me. There are mysteries in the deep unknown regions of space, prey worthy of my twilight years." "Will I see you again?" Jake asked. "The universe is vast, but hunters have a way of finding each other." Vex Thor reached into his pack and pulled out his personal hunting blade, the weapon he had carried for over 3 centuries. "I give this to you, kin of my choosing. Carry it with honor. Teach others to carry similar honor." Jake accepted the blade with trembling hands. It was an incredible gift, worth more than any technology. "I will honor this, I promise." "I know you will," Vex Thor said. "You were scorned once, young Jake Morrison, but you have become a legend in your own right. A human who remembered what your species was before cities and starships. A hunter who will be remembered when I am dust." They embraced, human and Kralth, student and teacher, kin bound by choice rather than blood. Then Vex Thor turned and walked toward his ship, without looking back. Jake watched until the vessel lifted off and disappeared into the darkening sky. Lisa found Jake still standing there an hour later. "He's really gone?" "Yes," Jake said. "But his teachings remain, and we'll pass them on." Together, they walked back toward the Frontier Hunters headquarters. Tomorrow would bring new students, new challenges, new hunts. Jake Morrison, once the colony's greatest failure, had become its greatest protector. He had proven that strength came in many forms, and that sometimes the skills the modern world forgot were exactly what survival required. The forest whispered around them as they walked, and Jake listened to it with hunter's ears, forever grateful for the legendary Kralth who had seen potential where others saw only failure.